Hello, this is Arthur Melman. I'm your host today for GGG Insights, and this is one of our series on basically the future of East Hampton, but more particularly the electric and other utility grids that are inadequate out here and have to be rethought about in order to provide both a greener source of energy and also resiliency and independence if something were to happen up Island or elsewhere. Today we're very fortunate to have with us Michael McDonald, who's really thought about these things on a much broader scale than just East Hampton for, was it 40 years now, Michael, I think?
Yes.
Okay, and Michael's background is probably best surmised or best summarized by saying that Michael has thought through not only our focus on electricity, but really on all the aspects of human nature that use assets in the environment. Michael, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background? Obviously, you've studied a lot of this area, but did you start off as an engineer or something like that, or?
Well, I did run the U.S. Medical Technology Policy Committee when I was running the Koop Foundation and working a lot with the White House on the final stages of healthcare reform and on setting up the national health information infrastructure. But I'm actually a doctor of public health, but my focus has been on communications and computing, as well as how do we elevate health and human security. So my dissertation work was looking at the globalizing intelligent network and the emergence of a type of system of resilience that could manage what is coming at us in the 21st century.
Well, I think a lot of our focus was initially that the town of East Hampton wants to be 100% green by some date, and we'll either get there or we won't get there. But we
won't get there.
We won't get there. Okay. And I think people have said, well, we have offshore wind, and we'll take that bucket of nice green energy and put it right here in East Hampton, but it doesn't work that way. That bucket of nice green energy is going to go all over the Long Island LIPA system. So we could take credit for that, but it's not going to really get us very far. But now you and some of your colleagues have been talking about a couple of ideas that are really fascinating. And we had Linda James, who's the head of the Sustainability Committee here in East Hampton, go over a whole portfolio of different things we could be doing. And the ones that really could have a very substantial impact were microgrids and community choice aggregation.
Yes.
And I'd like you you could start at 36,000 feet and go down, but I would like to really focus this and our next program on those two aspects of this whole puzzle.
Okay.
And,
well, both of those relate to something that we would call the prosumer energy revolution.
Okay. A
prosumer is a local producer of energy versus a consumer of energy. The old paradigm with a central grid is that you have one monopoly producer that delivers it through the central grid, and then you have millions of consumers, and they just consume.
Yeah, in our world, the utility we have to deal with is LIPA and PSE&G.
Yeah, so LIPA and PSE&G is being a monopoly. They are essentially an extractive industry. They provide electrons into the community, but they extract the capital. But the era that we're going into is we have now, with the new technologies of solar and batteries, we have the ability to produce energy locally, and we have the ability to tie that into our local economy. So that's the direction that we're going. Solar and batteries makes the cost of energy much lower. It also allows us to be able to island our systems so that we have a hurricane and we can actually still have energy during and after the hurricane. Whereas with the central grid in Puerto Rico was out for 6-8 months.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people are slowly getting to realize out here, if there were a hurricane or other natural disaster, I think a lot of people are under the misapprehension that the federal state governments would rush supplies to East Hampton, which is relatively sparsely populated, whereas in reality, they'll rush supplies, but those supplies will all go to the New York City metropolitan area, then Brookhaven, which is more heavily populated. And at the end of the day, or the week or the month, something will get out here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're out here during that period of time, you're really on an island.
Yeah, but there's good news and bad news about that. The bad news is, yes, we could be out of energy for months at a time without electricity. But the good news is
Oh,
that
thank you. I'm looking for good news about that. We've had a very downbeat series of discussions. Go ahead.
Well, the good news is that there's a very strong argument for East Hampton becoming a regulatory sandbox because of our extreme risk out here of having the systems destroyed and for us to be without our economy, essentially, which is completely dependent upon these resources, this infrastructure. We have the ability to build our own systems. So with solar and batteries, you can put them in every household, and each household can be a producer of energy. As this evolves, you can have the households actually producing more energy than they need, and they can start selling to their neighbors.
You know, it's funny you
within
say
these
that because I was
distributed
with our supervisor, Peter von Skoyak, maybe 2 hours ago, and he put some solar panels on his house, and he looked down at his cell phone and realized he was now producing more than 200% of what he was using at his house at the moment he was
I'll
looking
buy
at
it.
that.
I'll buy it.
Okay, you'll buy it.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, LIPA buys it, and they don't pay him very much for it.
Well, yeah, but that's because we're stuck in an old set of policies. But that has to change, obviously. If the goal is to actually achieve the issues that deal with the issues that are surrounding climate change, we have to accelerate the movement toward distributed renewable energy.
So what you're really saying in my little example I'm using, I hope Peter's not watching because I'm taking advantage of him, that what we're really talking about is having Peter with his solar roof produce energy that may not go into the LIPA grid, but stay here in East Hampton somehow.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And so it would make sense if we want to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy, you actually give incentives for people who are for overproducing,
Sure.
so that they can then sell that energy and then have the benefit of that overproduction. Now a lot of people will jump in because the earlier adopters would make money on it.
Well, let's just be very practical. Peter's house is someplace in East Hampton, and the only way it's connected to my house is through the LIPA grid. So how is he going to get his electricity from his roof over to me?
Well, yeah, people don't know a lot about how the electrons move through systems.
I'll
and so
raise
on.
my hand. I'm one of those.
And then they don't know much about how that's all financed.
I've
and
raised my
priced.
hand again.
So the one thing that we can look at, for example, is energy arbitrage. So if we use community choice aggregation legislation.
By the way, that was another word that came up during our discussion with Linda James, and we said we have to have a separate discussion about that one. But go ahead.
And I think some of the other speakers in this series are going to deal with that. Craig
Correct.
Van Sickle, for example, went out and spent time with the experts in California that are building the third generation of those systems now, which is accelerating very quickly the renewable energy build out in California. So we'll go into that in detail.
Sure.
But the bottom line is it allows the town to provide to its residents the options to have an open market within their choices of energy. So there's no longer a master-slave relationship between the utilities and the public.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only choices I have today are as I could buy my electricity from my house from PSE&G, or I can buy the electricity somewhat cheaper from Agira Energy and use PSE&G's wire system to bring it into my house. But either way, I'm a slave to PSE&G.
Well, not under the evolution of the later generations of
That's what we
community
want to get
choice
into. That's what we want to get
aggregation.
into. Yeah.
It's one thing for a public utility to provide the movement of electrons through their system and to charge for the movement of those electrons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think anybody wants to complain about that. But if they're telling us that we've got to buy fossil fuel energy,
Mm-hmm.
because right now it's essentially almost 100% fossil fuel based, I would say I'm really not interested. Thank you. I'm going to put up solar panels and batteries. Okay. And if I have the ability through the CCA now to sell my excess energy, community choice aggregation.
Okay, CCA.
So if I have now the ability to sell my excess energy, I'm motivated to build that overcapacity. So it accelerates the process of the green political economy, essentially. A new locally based circular economy that starts building local businesses and local jobs that are green.
One of the things that you said, and again, it was on Linda's screen of things to do and talk about, batteries. We all know what a battery is. We probably all bought some rechargeable batteries. We got tired of those and threw them away after a while. But you're really talking about the substantial batteries in my home or in my neighborhood with big time capacity.
Yes, but I think we shouldn't make it too daunting because when I was living in the Potomac Preserve and working in Washington, doing a lot of policy work, I had 44 times the sustainable ecological footprint under the New Zealand Index. That meant that if everybody on the planet was using as much energy as me, we would need 44 planets to be able to sustain the human population.
You must be a very greedy energy user.
Well, I was.
So am I.
But then I decided, well, I'm actually going to see how far I can cut this back. So I set up a home with solar panels and batteries, and I was able to actually get my ecological footprint down to 3.2 times the sustainable level, very rapidly.
So you cut this thing down by 1/8 or 1/7 or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, you say you use batteries. I just bought myself a Tesla, so I'm really battery conscious now. And I know if I plug it into the wall, the same place I plug in my toaster, I can build myself up 3 miles an hour. So if I want to go 300 miles, it takes me 100 hours to build it up. That's not the kind of batteries you're talking about. You're talking about batteries that really contain a lot of energy to at least if I'm producing solar, as in Peter von Skoyak's example, he's producing twice as much as he's using right now, and he wants to store it someplace in his home. How does he do that today?
Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can store energy. You can store energy in lithium-ion batteries, for example, and that's the direction that our storage economy's gone recently. But you can also store it in other forms of energy. So one of the other things that we should talk about somewhere in this series is looking at how to do storage, heat storage, for example. So storing as water you're using with your water heaters, but larger storage of water and then using heat pumps. So you can cut out about 25% of your costs of heating and cooling using heat pumps, air heat pumps, air-cooled heat pumps, or air-controlled.
But let's stay with the lithium-ion batteries for a second.
Okay. And it is moving beyond lithium-ion, but that's the status quo.
Okay.
Now, that's what
so
you've got.
Today, if I wanted to go to Amazon or someplace and I want a battery for my house, I'm probably going to find it's lithium-ion.
That's a little tougher to discern right now. Lithium-ion batteries are more complex than the lead-acid batteries.
Okay.
If you went to Walmart, you'd see lots of lead-acid batteries that are used in cars and so on. But the lithium-ion batteries are available, but you may have to work with system providers to be able to get
Okay,
those.
but today, I mean, literally this afternoon, if I want to go over to Peter's house, what can he buy to store his energy that he's not using at this time?
Yeah, well, there's lots of people right now in East Hampton that within this East Hampton Rev Grid consortium testbed that already have these lithium-ion batteries. So a Tesla battery or a Sonnen battery that's connected to their solar panels, that's a lithium-ion battery.
That's that. Tesla was selling something besides the car
power
charger.
wall.
They're calling it a power wall.
Yeah, yeah,
That's basically a big battery. Is that what it is?
That's a big lithium-ion
Oh,
battery.
okay.
And when we say big, there are actually probably lots of stacked small batteries.
A
in
lot of
most
small
cases.
batteries in this big container.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
let's go back to Peter's house. So he's generating this energy. He's gone out and he's bought one of these. What's that? What you call it? The thing, the wall unit.
the
power wall. He's got a power wall.
Yeah.
How much energy can he store?
Well, it
How
depends.
long can he operate his house?
It depends upon how many of these power walls he wants to use, or how many of the actually
Batteries
smaller
inside,
batteries they're using. So there, and you can actually do that separate from Tesla or Sonnen.
Oh, sure,
You can
right. I'm
build
just
your
using
own,
Tesla
which
because
I've
they're
had friends
advertising.
do, which cuts the cost to a third of the
I'm
cost.
sure if it doesn't say Tesla on it, it costs half as much.
That's correct.
So let's call it a power wall from somebody else.
Yeah, but at any rate, if you're coupling your solar assets with your lithium-ion batteries, that's the most easily consumed product today if you want to go in the direction of becoming more green and producing as much energy as you
So
can.
if I have
given your
if I have the solar panels in my house and I'm producing, as Peter is, 200% of my needs right now,
Yeah.
I can store in this battery today, with today's technology, the power to run my house at night when the sun doesn't shine.
That's correct.
And do you have any idea how much this stuff costs? I mean, how much does it cost to put one of these units in?
Well, again, it depends upon what you're willing to do yourself and what you're doing with different vendors.
Okay.
What vendor choices you're making. But in the smaller houses with an initial purchase of a system that you can build on,
Sure.
You probably could get a lot started with about $15,000. But it'd be hard to find a system that might be $50,000 in
Now,
East Hampton.
Let's just talk about that. 15,000, is that for the solar panels and this big battery pack, or just the battery pack?
Right, for both.
Oh, okay. That's not that ridiculous.
You can start with smaller units. For example, the one I started with cost somewhere in the range of about $3,000. Okay, that was the start. So you can build it incrementally, but then you have to think about it a little bit.
Sure.
But Tesla will come in with a
big
$15,000 or a $30,000 solution and plunk it in.
Yeah, however much you want to spend, they will have a solution for you.
Yeah.
I know that mentality. But what you're really saying is you started at one point with a $3,000 system, which sounds like a few solar panels and some way of...
And batteries,
And batteries.
lead-acid batteries, yeah.
Oh,
So-
lead-acid batteries.
So what I did was basically move out of Potomac and bought a 40-foot cruising sailboat, which already had the batteries. I built
okay.
the arch and put the solar panels up and lived in it for 8 years and was able to measure everything coming in and everything going out.
so you really cut the cord, absolutely here.
Yeah, I was off-grid for 8 months a year. So when it got really cold, I had a choice of going to essentially natural gas
Sure.
to or for heating or plugging in.
So what you're really saying is today, if I wanted to, I could put, assuming my roof faces the right way and there aren't too many trees and there are not too many shadows, I could put solar panels on my house, literally cut the wire to LIPA today, and get some kind of an installation of batteries. And obviously this is not going to be 59 cents, it's going to be thousands of dollars.
Yes, which is financeable.
Financeable, right,
You don't have to
sure.
put all of that out yourself.
Right. There are probably tax credits and grants and all kinds
is
of
that, too.
goodies that I get. So what we're really talking about right now is not some futuristic idea, but something that a homeowner can do today, which
Yeah.
I didn't realize. Quite
Yeah, I did
frankly.
it 15 years ago.
Well,
So-
you're much more advanced than I am. I'm an old guy. I move slowly.
Well, the market's here. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the ability to do all of this now. Now, does that completely fulfill all of our energy needs? We have to be careful about where we are in the transition of this.
Sure.
We're not going to leap immediately from our fossil fuel-based political economy into a green political economy just because everybody's going to slap
Well,
up
in
solar
my
panels.
example, I was cutting the wire to LIPA,
Yeah.
but I wasn't cutting off my oil supplier yet. So, but this is really interesting to me because I didn't realize I could literally do that today. I could literally cut myself away from the LIPA
Well,
system.
I think LIPA will argue you can't do that.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
And I don't know all the legal
Oh, okay.
details of this, but they've set up laws that maintain a monopoly control. They knew that this is coming, this day is coming, because the technology that they've put massive amounts of capital into is really antiquated now.
Sure.
So they're doing everything they can to have this, to stop the mass migration out of the central grid. Hawaii is already gone. It's
So what your guess is my electric meter spins around like this. If I did the solar installation on my roof and I get myself a bunch of batteries, my meter has to keep on going, but it can go incredibly slowly. Because LIPA
yes,
has
but
the right to
in addition, theoretically, you can sell it back to LIPA, but they're going to pay you pennies on the dollar.
They're paying me very little. I
Okay,
know.
so it's much better to sell to your neighbors, but they're going to say you can't do that, okay, because of their monopoly. So there will be a time before the monopolies begin to collapse, and they are collapsing in California, for example.
Okay, but right now it sounds like I can become a generator and a storer of electrical energy, maybe in a different form, but I can become a generator and I could use a tiny bit of LIPA power, whatever the law says I must use, and I could actually operate myself. I guess this.
You can. Technically, absolutely, you can.
I guess the analogy is when LIPA's lines go down, and my generator goes up, and I'm burning propane or something. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm basically self-generating. But you're talking about self-generating with the sun, which is up all the time, or if I have a windmill or something, I can use the wind. But this is very much different from where I personally perceived ourselves to be right now. I didn't realize we were that close to being, forget the legal structures that inhibit us, that close to being able to become self-sufficient and self-reliant and independent.
Well, I did that 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's technically very feasible, but again, we're dealing with a monopoly provider of electricity through the central grid, which is going to do everything they can
to slow it down.
Yeah, because they've got 30 years of amortized cost in fossil fuel, and they would much prefer to pay off all those expenses before they have to migrate. So they're going to do everything they can to slow this down, and they have. But if we, for example, engage a community choice aggregation approach, and East Hampton says, well, thank you, but we're actually going our own way. We're going to start an open energy market, and we're going to start with energy arbitrage, where we're going to sell to NYPA the
Excess energy we generate.
the NISO, the New York ISO. We're going to arbitrage what we produce extra, and get the financial benefits from that. Now, again, today, LIPA is trying to do everything they can to make sure that they remain a monopoly. So that's not allowed today. But in many other places, that's the direction it's going very quickly, and it will happen here because I think the pitchforks are coming out pretty quickly.
People with the pitchforks, right? But what I'd like to do in our next segment is pick up this idea of microgrids, because that sounds like, again, using my Peter example, I may probably abusing him. In my little example, he could probably do something where he has a wire that goes over to his neighbor's house, and they share back and forth. I mean, that's what if he did that, he'd be probably breaking 25 laws, but he would actually have, just with that little example, a microgrid.
No question, it happened during Sandy. In Long Island, people were doing that. They were, if they had solar panels and they had batteries or they had generators, they were just giving energy to their neighbors.
There's a lot of material for us to cover, but I think where we're starting from is very interesting, and that is, this is an area that's rapidly changing. Technologically, a lot of the tools we need are here, and as they become in larger and larger supply, the cost to buy them or rent them or lease, whatever, is going down rapidly.
No question.
I mean, there's no question in my mind that I remember when things like solar panels were fiendishly expensive, and now they're basically readily available.
Yeah. But one thing that I think we need to throw into the discussion for future pieces of this series is it's not just the energy revolution, but simultaneously there's a revolution in communication and computing.
And our time is up today. So again, I thank you, and we will continue. I will come back with the same sweater.